The first time I drove Truett to a speaking engagement, we were I can't even remember where we went, but I'm prepared for questions such as what are the chicken prices right now? What are all the business questions? And we did talk about the business, but he really began to talk about, hey, how's this? Do you like working here? Do you is this helping you become a better husband, a better dad? And I began to realize Truett is more interested in me as a person than just a chicken salesman. And to your point, that's when I discovered his secret of growing the business. Truett was more interested in the business growing people than people growing the business, but that's how he grew the business, because he understood that if you grow people, they'll take care of it. That everything else will take care of itself. And so and then at the end of that night, I would have already run through a brick wall for Truett, but now I would have run through 100 because he genuinely cares for me. And that was
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners. Today, I am welcoming Jeff Henderson to the Business of Advice podcast. Jeff is someone that I've known about for a long time. We have some mutual friends and acquaintances, but this is our first chance to actually get to talk in person, so I'm looking forward to this. A little background, Jeff is an entrepreneur, speaker, pastor, business leader. He spent time at Chick-fil-A, where CEO Dan Cathy called Jeff one of the 5 greatest employees in the company's history. After leaving Chick-fil-A, Jeff has helped lead 3 of North Point Ministries locations and growth in Atlanta. And he wrote a book that you all should go pick up called Know What You're For, A Growth Strategy for Work, an Even Better Strategy for Life, which we'll talk a little bit about that book today also. So, Jeff, glad that we're finally connecting, and welcome to the Business of Advice podcast.
Cody, I'm honored to be here, man. Great to see you. And I'm just, grateful for what you're doing for the business community and honored to be a part of it.
Well, we were talking before, and so many people that we've had, from Steve Robinson, who was Chief Marketing Officer at Chick-fil-A, Andy Stanley, who we had an event last year, and then John Maxwell. I know you're close with all of those, and I've heard about you from all of them. So this is going to be a great conversation. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I just ride those guys' coattails. That's all I'm doing. So
hey,
for those
good coattails to ride. So
good people to draft off of, for sure.
So let me ask this opening question. So you started with the Atlanta Braves, moved to Chick-fil-A, then to North Point. So those are all 3 what I would call iconic organizations. Maybe just walk us through your journey from professional sports, corporate life, to ministry.
Absolutely. Well, it's, I'm one of those people, and I think I'm probably in the majority of people, that when you said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would probably have to be honest and say, well, other than playing the National Basketball Association, I don't really know. And I think we do, college freshmen a disservice when we say, what is your major? We give them one box to check.
Yep.
And so I just kind of went on a journey, and I was a big sports fan, and I didn't know that you could, and I enjoyed marketing. I didn't know that you could do sports marketing. So working for the Braves, I thought, wow, that's interesting. And it was a great opportunity for me to discover what I was good at and what I was not good at. And that led me to meeting some folks from Chick-fil-A, and, that eventually developed some friendships and along the way. And then Chick-fil-A was a pivotal point in me moving to North Point Ministries. And so I've just discovered a principle that you don't have to figure out what to do for the rest of your life. You just have to figure out what to do next. And so I've just kind of followed those journeys. Truett Cathy taught me that to take advantage of unexpected opportunities. Do your best, show up, work hard. And when you do, unexpected opportunities are going to come your way. So, and especially in today's world, Cody, I don't know. I mean, I'm a big believer in plans, but I don't know if 5-year plans are really reality anymore.
No
and
kidding.
So just trying to figure out what to do next along the way, and having wise advisors. And that's, as I look back, I'm like, wow, look at how I've been able to work for guys that you just mentioned, Steve Robinson, Andy, and then working with John now.
Well, and even Truett Cathy, I know in your book, which I want to jump into that here in a second. You talk or kick off the book talking about driving Truett Cathy around, right? You're driving a billionaire, trying to make sure you don't wreck. One of the things you said early there, and then I'll jump into a few questions I'd love to ask you about the book. But you just said something that was the first thing I highlighted, and you said Truett Cathy used the business to grow people. He didn't use people to grow the business. And I think for so many entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast, that was just something that jumped out of me. I think it's something that we've tried to model. But can you maybe just kick us off by talking a little bit about that too? What you saw and how he really use the Chick-fil-A business to grow the people there, not vice versa, and just that subtle difference between how you approach that.
Sure. The first time I drove Truett to a speaking engagement, we were I can't even remember where we went, but I'm prepared for questions such as what are the chicken prices right now? What are, all the business questions. And we did talk about the business, but he really began to talk about, hey, do you like working here? Is this helping you become a better husband, a better dad? And I began to realize Truett is more interested in me as a person than just a chicken salesman. And to your point, that's when I discovered his secret of growing the business. Truett was more interested in the business growing people than people growing the business, but that's how he grew the business. Mm-hmm. Because he understood that if you grow people, they'll take care of it. That everything else will take care of itself. And so and then at the end of that night, I would have already run through a brick wall for Truett, but now I would have run through 100 because he genuinely cares for me. And that was a principle that I discovered too, is that when people feel cared for, they will do more. And, so many businesses and organizations don't understand that principle. And what they do is they engage the hands of people, but they don't engage their hearts. And in today's world, if there's a growing sandsdemic. We all know what a pandemic is, but the sandsdemic is a shrinking workforce, particularly in America. And while that is hitting the service industry and the hospitality industry and the restaurant industry harder, it's a wave that's coming for all of us because there are more 80-year-olds than 2-year-olds here, at least in America. And if you don't have a thriving culture and if you don't truly care for people, they're going to just leave. And we're seeing that. The last few months, 4 million people have just left the workforce, and they're going to go do something next and do something else. So a thriving culture has always been important. As Peter Drucker would say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. But with Truett, I saw it in person. I saw it in real time. Here's a billionaire. And he was also asking me, what do you see about the business that I can't see? Which was so fascinating because he could have said, hey, I invented the chicken sandwich. I know exactly what all this works and how this should work. But he knew that even as the founder, he had a limited view of the business because you've only got 2 sets of eyes on one life experience. And here I am, just a few years into the business, and I would just bring a different perspective just because I have a different viewpoint. I haven't been here, and I get to say and ask questions like, why do we do it this way? And why do we do it that way? And so he was open to that. He wasn't defensive about that. So that kind of confident humility is really at the heart of I think his success and his legend, really.
I think for anyone that listens to, just that idea of being open and able to ask those questions of the people that are working for you, and they are going to see things that you don't see. A lot of them are a little bit more on the front lines. Another thing that hit me, and you're a great example of this at Chick-fil-A, it's something that I think I've experienced and just come to realize maybe over the last 5 years. We've been in business now for 17 years. So I say we're a maturing organization. For the first 10 years, we felt like we were in this startup kind of growth phase, but we've had some long-time great team members that have left over the last few years. And this realization, one of the things we talk about is our core values is we want people who are always growing. And it just hit me that if you are always investing in the growth of your people, it's a little naive not to assume that won't sometimes lead them to leave your organization. And that's okay. It creates opportunities for others. How have you seen that? Because as you were just sharing that, I'm like, man, you're a great example of that. You grew at Chick-fil-A, but then moved on from that. Is any lessons or things that you've just seen there?
Yes, I think both Chick-fil-A and North Point Ministries have never had the perspective that we own they are our people, if you will. They've instead said we are a steward of the people that are passing through. And now Dan Cathy, a few years after I left Chick-fil-A, he said, by the way, Jeff, just know you're on loan to North Point Ministries, which I loved, right? But they said, hey, what we want to do is invest in you. And if you go and, in fact, it's been honoring to me to know that the Cathy family and Chick-fil-A are proud of me and the fact that I helped launch 3 churches in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And I tell them that I wouldn't have been able to do what I did without being dipped in the Chick-fil-A culture. And, when I left Chick-fil-A, I thought to help start a church, I'm thinking this is the weirdest career move because it's two totally different things, right? You're selling chicken over here and you're launching a church over here. But what I quickly discovered, Cody, is, oh my goodness, there are people here and they have the same issues. And it's actually not that different. People want a compelling vision. They want to be led well. Everyone deserves to be led well. And the leadership principles that I learned from Chick-fil-A just started coming out of me. And yeah, there's different roles and different responsibilities, and I get all that. But at the end of the day, I just thought, oh my goodness, those 6 years at Chick-fil-A prepared me for this journey. And now for the journey, I was at North Point for 17 years. And now being able to serve churches all across the country and the world, they have said the same thing. I mean, Andy told me right before I left, we're proud of the fact that we can say we helped, launch you. So it was not, hey, you belong to us. It was, we're glad we served you well and we're cheering you on. And I think that's a healthy perspective to have.
It really is, and I think it's one that not everyone has, but I've just seen it firsthand a lot of the past few years, and it's changed my perspective a lot. So that was great. I love that. Steward the people that are passing through. I wrote that down. That's really good.
And it's hard because, as a great organization like you have, you invest in the people that are there and you want to serve them well, and then they leave or some leave, but you have to think, no, that investment's still there. It's just going beyond our company. And that's when I would tell our team at the 3 churches I led, hey, I believe every one of you could lead your own nonprofit in your own organization. I feel like my role is to help prepare you. I want you to stay here for the rest of your career, but if you choose otherwise, that's fine. I just want you to look back and go, you know what? That time working with Jeff Henderson prepared me for this role. And that just would help give me the mindset to remind myself, Jeff, they're not your people. They do not belong to you. You will have to give an account on how you led and stewarded their time with you. And that just helps have a healthy perspective so that when they do leave, and it still hurts, but if they do leave, you know that, okay, I hope to have served them really well in their time here.
Man, that's so good. We're 12 minutes in. I haven't even asked you the first question I had to ask you. And there's already been just a ton of great leadership knowledge, wisdom. So let me jump in. In 2019, you wrote the book, Know What You're For. I was on a call last week with Chad Johnson with John's organization, and he said it's the book he gives out the most. So for everyone, you need to go pick it up. But in the book, you boil business down to basically 2 questions. Question 1, what are we known for? And then question number 2 is, what do we want to be known for? What is it about and you maybe do those in reverse order, but what is it about those 2 questions that's so powerful that every business owner, entrepreneur needs to understand and realize?
First, Cody, I think simple wins. I think sometimes in business or nonprofits, we can get too complicated. So when people have told me, Jeff, these questions are simple. I'm like, absolutely. They're not easy, but they're simple. And I was challenged by this by a mentor of mine. I was having breakfast with him and I said, this is a few years ago, I said, man, I've just been really blessed. I've been on the front row of Chick-fil-A, which has had same store sales success for the last 50 some odd years, which is unheard of in the industry. Same store sales increases means, if you're not familiar with the restaurant industry, it's not the new stores, it's the existing stores that have been in business for a year. You compare those. That's the real health of the business. And for 50 some odd years, Chick-fil-A's had same store sales increase, and their sales are just gangbusters now. I then go and work at what some have called the largest church in America. So I just said, wow, what a blessing. And he pushed back on that. And he said, well, yeah, it's a blessing, but it's a stewardship responsibility. You owe it to the rest of us. How did they grow? What did they do? And so as I looked at it, I came down to these 2 questions. What do you want to be known for? That's your vision. That's your unique niche. That's as Steve Jobs would say, your dent in the universe. What do you want to bring that's uniquely different and special to the marketplace? But then question number 2 is, what are you known for? That is the customer's reflection back to you on how well you are delivering on your hopes and your promises for question number 1. But here's why those questions the answers to those questions are so important. When the answers to those 2 questions match, when what you want to be known for is what you are known for, you harness the greatest form of engine growth any business or organization will ever receive, and that is positive word of mouth advertising. When I can get people talking about my church, my business, my organization, my book, whatever it is, they become vision carriers for my idea and my business. And the more vision carriers I have, the more vision casters I have. But it comes down to having a compelling vision that solves a problem for them or serves them really, really well, and then delivering it in such a way that they go, wow, you gotta check out what Cody is doing. Wow, you gotta have this chicken sandwich. Wow, you gotta go to this nonprofit and serve them. They're doing incredible work. But to do that, you gotta shrink the gap between what you want to be known for and what you are known for. And I saw Chick-fil-A do that. I saw Chick-fil-A restaurants do that. I saw this happen with the churches that we launched and the churches that I was partnered with. And the more vision carriers you have, the further and faster the vision goes.
Jeff, on that, how does an entrepreneur, business owner, leader go about, and maybe even with the help of their team, identifying that gap that you talked about? So this is what we want to be known for. What are we really known for? You know, what would our customers say about us? And then how do you go about maybe fixing or getting those two to better align?
Mm-hmm. First, Cody, I think leaders need to assume the worst. And what I mean by that is they need to assume that no one can recite or understand what their vision is. And then just go around and take a vision inventory, which is, you can do this in person, you can do this on Zoom, you can do this on Slack. But the question simply is, what do you think we want to be known for? And just listen to people. And if you get a wide variety of answers, the warning light on your organizational dashboard should be blinking, because there's confusion. And when there's confusion in the office space, there will be confusion in the marketplace. If the team doesn't know what we want to be known for, the customer certainly isn't. So first, you got to do a vision inventory. Once you get clarity on that, then you have to be for four groups of people. And this is how you shrink the gap. First, you get clarity on what you want to be known for. And then you need to be for the customer, for the team, for the community. You need to have a larger purpose. If the purpose is, in today's world, if the purpose is we just want to stay in business, you won't. Because there needs to be a bigger, compelling business reason. Why are you in business? What problem are you solving? And then ultimately, you need to be for you. I mean, the only person that we have control over is the only person you have control over is you, Cody, and the only person I have control over is me. And so I got to bring my best version to business and the people I serve every day. And so I'm a work in progress. We're all a work in progress. So the book really details strategies about how to be for those four groups of people. But when I talk to businesses about this, they sometimes shrug their shoulders and they say, well, Jeff, we already do this. I'm like, well, here's what the tendency is. The tendency in any organization is to be in what I call self-preservation, that the most important entity isn't the customer, the team, the community, or the leaders. The most important entity is the business itself. And so what happens is we make the business the hero, and we go on an organization's Instagram page, if you will, and it's all about product shots, and it's all about, look how great we are, and did you know that we're better than our competitors? And what that is, if you use a sporting analogy, we've put the business on the playing field, and we put the customers and the team and the community in the stands trying to cheer the business on. And that's why I wrote in the book, if the business was a person, many businesses would be considered narcissists, because it's all about, look how great we are. So thriving organizations will understand that they are more interested in becoming a fan of the community and the team and the customers. And they will put the team and the customers and the community on the field, and the organization is in the stands cheering them on, because they're not the heroes, they are the guides. And so once you understand that, and that filter and that viewpoint, it helps you avoid what I call insider-itis, seeing the organization from your point of view versus the customer's point of view. And an example of that in my Chick-fil-A experience one of the things I would do is I would go to individual stores and help them market their business. And I would say, one of the best things that you can do at 12:01, 1 minute after afternoon, right, the height of lunch, is to get out from the kitchen and get in front of the counter and see the business from the customer's point of view. And I understand this. Sometimes I would get, Jeff, you corporate guys, I mean, do you understand this is the busiest time of the year, busiest time of the day? Absolutely, I do understand that. That's why you need to see it, because you have to see the business from the customer's point of view. As a pastor, I would show up early on a Sunday morning. There was no trash. There was no parking problems. It was peaceful. It's because no one was there yet. So I had to pick particular Sundays to just come at 11:05, our busiest service, and to experience the craziness of all of that. And that would allow me to see the organization from our attenders' point of view. And that would just help me be more for our customer.
I think that's something we talk to our advisors that we work with and support a lot. I own a couple restaurants. I always use this story. We purposefully pay secret shoppers to come in and have this whole checklist of things they go through, right? And then report back to us on all of it. So we created this secret shopper checklist for our advisors to use, because so often you're in the business day to day. You may be coming in the back door. You don't even see the experience that your customer has. So when I read that, I'm like, this is like the secret shopper, checklist that you need for the business. And obviously I saw that, even through the book, talking about how you would do that at North Point and have someone who would be assigned to kind of secret shop every week, and just what's the experience look like and how does that work? So I think for any business owner, like doing that, getting that insider-itis fixed is a really, really important thing.
And we did something crazy too, Cody. We would actually hire people off Craigslist for $25. Come to our church and just tell us what you experienced, which is great. But this sounds really fun. But what you're doing, Andy would call it pulling the rock and seeing the squiggly things under the rock. This takes courage, right? It takes courage to have secret shoppers come in and to share with you things that you won't see, can't see, or that they don't like. And what you're looking for isn't necessarily all the negative opinions. What you're looking for are trends. If I have one person that had a negative experience, that's bad. We need to work on that. But if I have one person out of 50, I'm like, okay, I don't see a trend here. But if I have 10 people out of 30 that are saying, hey, I don't understand this, or this was confusing. Okay, now I've got a trend that I haven't been able to see, and it's going to help me be for them. So that's why this is going to take courage, And there's another word for this. It's called Yelp in the restaurant industry, right?
Yep.
And that can sometimes, you got to be careful with that, because that can just be somebody that's having a bad day. So anyway, in the restaurant industry right now, there are just a lot of rude customers. So you have to balance all of that out with what are the trends that I'm seeing here that I can actually do something about.
Yeah, that's great. I think everyone should do that. One of the, and I have a bunch of stuff I want to talk about, but you mentioned a person in your book early on that you admire, which was Horst Schulze, who is someone that I've admired, read, listened to him for years. What are some, and for those who don't know, maybe you can even get the background. Horst was at Ritz-Carlton for a long time, very well known in the hospitality. What are some things that you learned from him that you think, maybe that you admire so much, or that other entrepreneur business owners can implement from him?
Well, I think our listeners are probably familiar, and our viewers are familiar with the Ritz-Carlton. What they may not be familiar with is something called the Malcolm Baldrige Award, which is the highest quality customer service award that an organization can get. The standards to win this award is just, the hoops you have to go through is just incredible. And no one has ever won it twice, with the exception of the Ritz-Carlton. And so Horst Schulze is just a legend in customer service. And he taught me that the question that customers are asking, because this is, if you want to know the best question to ask in terms of customer service, I'll tell you, Jeff, I'm like, I would like to know that, Mr. Schulze. And he says, the customers are asking, does this organization truly care about me? Do they care about me? And he goes, so when you go into an organization, let's just, when we used to go back in the day when we used to go into a bank, right? We'll go into a bank and you would stand in a queue line, and then they would look at you and say, next. He would say this story. He goes, how many of you here today, your name is next? Well, that's what you were just called. They don't really truly care about you. So the Ritz-Carlton thought about, the greatest sound that we like to hear is when people say our names. Well, they thought through, how do we get someone's name in the first minute that they're on the property? So quick story, and I put this in the book. My daughter and I were, and when she was younger, we would go on these father-daughter, dances for Valentine's Day. And so we stayed at a Ritz-Carlton near Buckhead Church, which is one of the churches I helped serve. And so we get there, drive up, get our bags out, and they're, what's your name? My name's Jeff Henderson. This is my daughter, Jessie. So they said, we got your bags, just go into the lobby and we'll see you there. So I'm walking up, but I look back and the guy he's going all Secret Service on me. He's speaking into his sleeve. And I know what he's doing. He's radioing my name to the front desk. Yep. So we walk up. I think my daughter, Cody, was maybe 8 or 9. So we walk up the front desk and they're like, Mr. Henderson and Jessie, we're so thrilled you're here. My daughter's eyes got about this big. And then after we were leaving, she said, Dad, how did they know our names? And I said, honey, this is near Buckhead Church. Your dad is big time. Everybody knows my name around here. So that was, my daughter is now 22. I can still recall them saying, Mr. Henderson and Jessie. There's just the power of that. Wow. So I felt like the Ritz-Carlton cared about me because they knew my name. And it's those kind of strategies, putting yourself in the mind of the customer, in the shoes of the customer, and to go, let's show the customer that we truly care about them. And they showed their teams. I mean, their mission statement was ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen. That, hey, we are all ladies and gentlemen. And that's not just for the customers, it's for our team. And they need to treat you accordingly as well. So let's all treat each other with respect. A little known secret for those Chick-fil-A fans, Truett actually picked up the whole line of My Pleasure from the Ritz-Carlton. Some people think the Ritz-Carlton got that from Chick-fil-A. Yep. Truett actually got that from the Ritz-Carlton. And that was a distinguishing characteristic. But I'll say this, Truett never thought about comparing Chick-fil-A to his competitors. He thought about comparing Chick-fil-A to their potential, but let's not compare ourselves to those in our industry. Let's look at those organizations that are at the highest level of customer service, like the Ritz-Carlton and Walt Disney, and let's go study them. And that was also one of the biggest lessons I learned from Chick-fil-A, is don't limit yourself to those in your field. Find out people or organizations that are just doing incredible things and learn from them. And that's what you're doing with this podcast, Cody. Yeah. So, and that's just a huge value.
Well, there's, I always, when I read that story and hearing you tell it, 14 years later, you're still advocating for the Ritz-Carlton, right? And what you talk so much about in the book is doing this right, just the word of mouth advertising that you get. And that's a great example. I think the other thing that just hits me when you say that, I would say the advisors that we serve, 99% of the time, they know the people that are coming in to see them that day, right? They don't just have random people walking in off the street. So really thinking about that, how the person at your front desk is greeting them by name when they walk in the door. Most of our advisors now have, put one of the things we teach, you have to have some screen or some sign to where it's welcoming them as they come in, but just so many opportunities for everyone in your team to interact with them and use their name throughout the course of their time in your office. They may be there for an hour or two and could hear their name spoken, multiple times, would just be a great way to do that.
And I think along those lines, something I recommend, and this, again, not everyone wants to do social media, and I get that, but if you've got information about a prospective client, rather than just get their email address or their address or whatever, their phone number, ask where, what are you on Instagram? Are you on LinkedIn? And follow them, and then comment and like their post. If you do that before the meeting, you're going to be you're that further ahead, because you're showing that person, we are for you and we're paying attention to you. In fact, when I was at Gwinnett Church, one of the things we did at our staff meeting is we would like the post of the people in our church. We had this little hashtag for Gwinnett, and we would just spend the first 5 or 10 minutes just liking and commenting on people's posts. And what it did, and this is another thing I learned from Dan Cathy. Dan had this statement, which I thought was, still think is brilliant. And it was, we want to grow a small company. I love that, because it talks about the fact that we want to grow and we want to reach and serve as many people as we can, but we don't want to lose the personal, we see you and we can be personal to you. And for you. And when we liked people's Instagram posts, what it did is it helped us grow a small church. And, again, talking about lessons I learned, a lesson I learned from Andy along these lines is do for one what you wish you could do for everyone.
Yep.
And so, can you like everyone's posts, especially if you're a large business? No. But if you do it on a consistent basis, it adds up over time. And this is why I'm so passionate about understanding in today's world. I'm all about systems and scale. I'm obviously, Cody, I work for a restaurant chain that is a $17 billion chain that has every sandwich should have 2 pickles on it today. I worked at a church that had multiple outlets as well. So I'm all about systems and scale. But we got to be careful. Please don't let systems and scale drive out the humanity of the business. Anytime we start saying, you know what, I can't do it for everybody, so I'm not going to do it for anyone. You've allowed systems and scale in you've grown a large company, and now you're becoming invisible to your customer. You're not becoming as personable, and the more personable, the more remarkable. Oh my goodness, did you see that they liked my Instagram post? Oh my goodness, did you see that I got a thank you note? Did you see my name on the wall? Did you see that they said my name? Those are touches of humanity, and the organizations that will systematize that actually, and put that into the regular flow, like a Ritz-Carlton or like a Chick-fil-A, they're going to win. They're going to win the future.
You talk a little bit about scale there. You were, people probably forget this, but Chick-fil-A started off with one store, was kind of a regional chain in the Southeast, but then has grown into this national brand. You were a big part of that. I know when we had Steve speak, he points back to the sponsorship of the Peach Bowl as one of those big things. But as you look back on your experience there, were there some keys to scaling Chick-fil-A from that regional base to their national expansion?
Yes. First, and this isn't necessarily a plea for privately owned businesses, but they can make decisions. The Cathy family and Truett can make decisions for the health of the business and not have to try to please investors every 90 days. Truett, the fundamental principle about growth for Truett is that Truett didn't want to talk about getting bigger. He wanted to talk about getting better. And his principle was, if we get better, the customers will demand we get bigger. Well, that sounds logical, and it is logical, but it is foreign in today's business world where, hey, we just got to find some investors and let's grow this thing. And again, Truett was interested in growth, but he knew that the best form of growth was customers growing the business, not artificially inflating a business with a bunch of outlets that's, through stock investments. All for stock investments, that's great. But if you got customer fueled growth, it's far, far better. So from my perspective, that idea of we just want to get better, and we're gonna do that is that slowed down the growth process in a really healthy way. The other thing that Chick-fil-A did, and I was there when they announced this, is that Truett several years before he passed away said, hey, I want our business to be completely debt-free. And he got a little bit of pushback because people said, well, Truett, look at this is a multi-billion-dollar organization. We only have about $200 million in debt. So you're not really in debt. To which Truett said, how would you like to be $200 million in debt? So what they did is they slowed down growth. They still had growth, but they were paying for growth out of cash, which was, again, a foreign concept, both in the business and the world of government, for sure. And now they're debt-free. And imagine being a multi-billion-dollar company and being debt-free. So they weren't infatuated with growth. They allowed systems and scale to better serve the customer. And those systems and scale then allowed the customer to grow the business for them and demand and say, hey, we need more Chick-fil-A's. In fact, I was at the Chick-fil-A convention earlier this year. John Maxwell spoke. John literally got on his knees and said, please come to my community in Florida. There's not a Chick-fil-A within 30 minutes. So that's what I'm talking about. The systems of, hey, how do you put 2 pickles on the sandwich and how do we scale this thing? But at the end of the day, all of this is designed to serve the customer better. It's not designed we want to grow, but growth is a byproduct of systems and scale. And sometimes I look at organizations and I think, no, your systems, you're using your systems just to grow versus using your systems to serve the customer better. Mm-hmm. And that's a big difference.
I spent, and Chick-fil-A is a brand I think I admire, lots of people do. A few weeks ago, I got a chance to spend a day with David Green, who's the founder of Hobby Lobby. And I'm guessing him and the Cathys probably know each other and talk because it was so eerily similar. Some of the things he talked about, debt-free company, privately held, right, have never been one to grow for the sake of growth at the expense of the customer. And I just think there's, I see it in our industry right now. There's a lot of growth. There's a lot of consolidation. There's a lot of private equity coming in, piling debt up on these businesses to grow and acquire others. But I think the ones that can grow it organically, stay in control, use cash to fuel their expansion, those are two world-class organizations that have done it a little bit differently, and then also maintain control throughout that, which I think is a really, really neat opportunity. One thing maybe I'll go back to, because you talked about Chick-fil-A taking that idea of saying my pleasure from the Ritz-Carlton. I've read and heard a little bit about how it took a while for that to really take hold in all the stores. And some of that is as you do grow, trying to get those systems implemented. What did you see there, and not just maybe how they created that, but how they eventually got buy-in from all the stores to where now they're known for my pleasure more than Ritz-Carlton is?
Mm-hmm. I was actually at the Chick-fil-A convention when Truett said that. He goes, hey, I was just at the Ritz-Carlton a few weeks ago. I said, thank you. They didn't say you're welcome. They said my pleasure. And I thought we could take that. And so he had us all stand up. He said, thank you. We said, my pleasure. And okay, how hard is this? So just go back to your stores and tell your team, instead of saying you're welcome, say my pleasure. That seems pretty simple. So Truett gets back, goes into a Chick-fil-A, orders a sandwich, which is his idea, by the way, the chicken sandwich. And the team member says, you're welcome. Well, Truett doesn't fire anybody, doesn't get mad. He doesn't fire off an angry email. He understood a principle. And this is such a helpful principle for me, Cody, that I'm so glad I saw it, learned it from him. And that was leaders are repeaters. Leaders are repeaters. You have to say you have to say it over and over and over again. And so Chick-fil-A has videos of Truett for the next 10 years at this convention saying my pleasure. So anytime I go into a Chick-fil-A and I hear my pleasure, I just ask myself, am I staying on message as much as Truett had to make this moment happen? This moment did not happen by accident. This moment did not happen with him saying it once. And I think sometimes we look at leaders like a Truett Cathy or a John Maxwell and think it's just easier for them. And I don't think that's true. I think they've had their own challenges, but I think they've implemented principles. And from Truett's standpoint, he just was not going to let my pleasure go away because he knew that no one else in his industry was going to even be thinking about this. And so he just thought and Truett, to be one of the most generous people, he was also one of the most frugal people I was ever been around. Because he was, he grew up in the Great Depression. Yeah. So Truett's thinking, and by the way, to say my pleasure doesn't cost us anything more, So you can add value to the customer and it doesn't cost us anymore. That's a win-win. And now it's just become a distinguishing characteristic. Even people that don't go to Chick-fil-A, they've heard of my pleasure in Chick-fil-A, but it happened because leaders are repeaters.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway. I don't remember if I heard Andy say that or somebody else one time, but just they're like, sometimes you have to repeat it so much to where you think it's gotten boring and then repeat it even more. And that's a great, I think many of us as entrepreneurs, and I see this a lot with advisors we work with, they'll go to one of our events, they'll get this new shiny idea. I think at times maybe their team is dreading them coming home from that event because they're going to have a bunch of new ideas, and the team knows, like, hey, if we just wait long enough, they'll get a new idea and they'll forget this one. So just a great reminder there of the things that you really want to stick as the leader. Important that you're staying on point with those. So
absolutely. And that really goes back to the question, what do you want to be known for?
Yeah.
Because, as leaders, we're infatuated with opportunities. We're infatuated, I think, typically with new ideas. But we got to be careful that we're not going to the next shiny thing. And then, because at some point we lose credibility. And you need to keep the vision fresh. But that's why language is so important in the organization. That's why I ask leaders, what is the primary language that people use to describe your organization? And if you don't know that, you need to know that, because that's how people are describing what you do.
We've talked a little bit about culture at the organizations you've been And so, I said we had Andy Stanley. He's been on the podcast. We also had him at an event. And I think his approach to culture really stood out. Obviously, the culture at Chick-fil-A, kind of goes without saying. What are the things that those leaders or maybe those organizations have gotten right about culture that you see other organizations miss on?
First, there's a compelling vision. And I call it the no snooze alarm organization, that you don't hit snooze because you have purpose waiting for you at work. And when you have purpose waiting for you at work, I mean, we all want a paycheck. We all need a paycheck. But when you combine a paycheck and a compelling purpose with a really good product, I mean, that's a win-win. So from Chick-fil-A standpoint, their corporate purpose was compelling to me. Part of their vision now is to be the world's most caring company. I love that. From North Point's perspective, they wanted to create churches that unchurched people love to attend. And that's what eventually drew me away from Chick-fil-A to being a part of this, because I had so many friends that didn't go to church and they thought it was irrelevant. And I thought, I feel like this could have a big impact on your life. Why don't we, and Andy had this statement that Atlanta doesn't need another church. It needs a different kind of church.
Yeah.
And why don't you come help us? Why don't you come help us do that? So that there's a compelling vision. And it was a no snooze alarm organization. And then I think also, although both organizations were very, very busy, they let you live a sustainable pace. And they understood that tenure is really important. If you look at the tenure of Chick-fil-A and the tenure at North Point, only crazy people like me ever leave, because, but at the same time, they've really, catapulted people out in the world to be doing some really fun things. So I think understanding, let's create a pace that people this is not their life. We want a healthy, wholesome person. And we believe a healthy, wholesome person will stay around here a lot longer. And then just having different staff values that they live out and live in and cast it. They cast the vision, they celebrate the vision, but they live the vision. And that's what I saw in both organizations. I didn't see a discrepancy between a leader or leadership team casting the vision, but not living the vision. And this is especially true especially important for the younger you go, the younger demographic. They can smell hypocrisy. They can smell when leaders are not being authentic. And the other thing I saw are leaders that were human, to say, hey, I made a mistake, or I don't know. I can't tell you how many times I've heard Andy go, I don't know. And that was it. He was, I don't know, but I bet we can't figure this out. In other words, what he was saying was, we is smarter than me. So what do you think? And then they allowed leaders to lead. And, when I was lead pastor at Buckhead Church in the early days, this was the first video church, one of the first video churches in the country, right? So here I am, this former chicken salesman guy leading this thing. Well, Andy could have called me every day and said, hey, what are you doing? And hey, I heard about this. And what is it? And I rarely heard from him. And he just said, hey, let me know. You're a great leader. You've got great experience. If you need my help, let me know. And he let me lead. And those early days I learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, but I learned from those mistakes. I made some good decisions and learned from those as well. So they allowed leaders to lead. They didn't micromanage. And this is another thing, and I'll close this answer to that great question. An organization has a choice. You can hire leaders or you can hire managers. Neither one is wrong. What happens, it gets wrong when you say you want to hire a leader, but you actually want to hire a manager. And I was not a manager. I was going to come in, I was going to innovate, I was going to create new ideas. And if you didn't allow me to do that, I would just go somewhere else or do something else. And both Chick-fil-A and North Point allowed me to explore that and to lead. And you don't micromanage leaders. You ask leaders, what can I do to help?
That's
and
really
how can I get out of your way? And that's, but if you want to hire managers, that's awesome. That's great. But you have to understand, if you're going to hire a manager, they're probably not going to grow the organization. They're going to manage the organization. And not that there's anything wrong with that, But sometimes organizations, I see this particularly in churches, especially multi-site churches, they say they want to hire a leader, but they really want to hire a manager. So they put a leader in that manager role as a lead pastor, and they get frustrated with that person because guess what he's trying to do? He or she's trying to innovate, lead, and change the process and challenge the process. So you got to I think culture comes down to, you want to hire leaders or managers. One's not right or wrong, but you just can't hire leaders and expect them to be managers and vice versa.
That might be, and you may have answered this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. You've also spent a lot of time around John Maxwell and work really closely with their organization. So, John Maxwell, the Cathys, Andy Stanley, you've been around some pretty well-known leaders. Is there something that impresses you about those 3 or 4 people that maybe others don't see or that they don't talk about?
I'm so impressed with the passion for growth. I mean, here's John. I told John, you didn't invent leadership, you invented the leadership category, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
But the first time I had dinner with John, he tricked me. He started asking me questions. Jeff, what do you think about this? And when you have this leader, and so I started answering these questions. And then about 5 minutes in, I'm like, whoa, time out. Why am I even talking here? But he was coming to the table going, hey, here's a younger leader. I'm going to learn from him. Well, that's, that requires humility. And John could have come to the table, which is true, by the way. John has written more on leadership than the authors 2, 3, and 4 combined. So he could have come to the dinner saying, Jeff, I'm the leadership guru, sit at my feet, and let me tell you what I have to say. He took the opposite of that. I see that with Dan as well. Dan has so many other interests. And somebody sent me a picture of Dan last night. He was in LA at some, innovation cohort thing that he's doing. And he's really developing this city down south of Atlanta. He's so passionate about that. Well, what people don't realize about that is Dan is becoming a better leader in the other avenues because he was in LA at this innovation cohort, and he's going to take some ideas and he's going to share them with Chick-fil-A. And Dan helped me understand that it's okay to check more than one career box. And Dan has like 72 career boxes, I think. But the thing I've learned about that is that Dan is learning, he is growing, and there's a passion for growth. And I see that with John. I mean, he's constantly trying to learn it from other people. He's constantly around others. He's thinking, he's growing. He just has a passion for growth. And even at 75, this is actually his busiest. Mark Cole, who's the president of the company, told me the other day, this is John's busiest year in terms of speaking engagements, in terms of the work he's doing with companies and organizations and churches and nonprofits. I mean, he's actually going in. I mean, here's a vision. These guys have a big vision, all of them. But John's vision before his life is done is to see a country transformed by values-based leadership. There's a vision for you, right? And so, but to do that, he's going to have to continue to grow. And I've seen that with Andy, arguably the best communicator in the country, but he's committed to being 3 weeks ahead in his sermon prep. And he's constantly asking the question and studying other communicators, how can I get better? So this passion for growth and asking the question, how can I get better? You could argue, hey, to all 3 of those guys, you've reached the zenith. Yep. You can coast now. I'm not seeing them coast at all.
That's a great observation. I was at John's exchange event last November, and I had seen John probably 8 to 10 years before that. And I told people he wasn't just a little better in November. He was like exponentially better than I had seen him, 8 to 10 years ago. And that was the thing that just stuck with me. Here he is at 75 years old, is accomplished, I don't know if there's all there is to accomplish, but just to see his like passion to continue to grow and get better. And then if you've been to that event, he has, I think maybe you've even spoke at that in the past. He has a lot of other people there speaking. And while he's interviewing, you can watch, he's also like, they say something good, like he's capturing that, he's writing it down, he's still learning from them. So it was really neat to see. And I think a great observation about any great leaders, they don't become complacent. They're constantly trying to grow and get better, knowing that one, I always say, I think to maximize the opportunities that they've been given, but to also be a good steward of what they're responsible for also.
Absolutely. I remember the first time I spoke at an event that John was attending, or he was speaking. It was his event, but he spoke, and then I spoke after him. So I'm speaking, and I see him taking notes. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what did he write down? What did I say? Did I say something?
What did I do?
I know. So you have this as a communicator. You're like, you're in the back of your mind thinking. So, but he has the role of a learner. What can I learn? I can learn from anyone. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the secret of their success.
I want to ask you one final question, then jump into these quick lightning round questions I like to ask at the end that I've asked everyone. But one of the things that you talk about, and I've just seen the power of it, and I want you to maybe reinforce it. You talk about the idea of gratitude and being for your team. And one thing that you mentioned in the book is you write, you have a challenge to write 3 thank you notes a day, 5 days a week, or basically 15 a week, and have kind of even created a system around that. Do you have stories around maybe the impact that's had, or how other people have taken that idea and implemented it and the impact it's had?
Absolutely. Well, I'll get pictures from people who say, I was going through, cleaning up my office, and I came across this picture that you wrote me, or I came across this note that you wrote me 10 years ago. I didn't throw it away. But there's an operator, Natalie Cheney in Virginia. She read the 4 book and started writing her team just thank you notes. Starts just using gratitude, leveraging gratitude to say thank you. And she said, Jeff, my sales are just going through the roof because I'm saying thank you. And, I'm all for education. I'm all for business school. I'm all for all of that. But some of this stuff is so simple, such common sense that, again, I think simple wins. And when I left Buckhead Church, and when I left Chick-fil-A, I wrote everyone that in the marketing department and on the executive committee a thank you note. And one of my friends said, you left Chick-fil-A better than anybody. And part of that, to be honest with you, Cody, I wasn't sure that video church was going to work. So basically these notes were like, if this doesn't work, can I come back? But there's a power that basically the power of a gratitude is I see you, and I'm thankful for you, and I'm for you. And what happens is that the principle here is that you're reinforcing the behavior you want repeated. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to reinforce the behavior I wanted repeated. So on Sundays, for example, I would, send on our, communication thread to our team, hey, were there any stories today that somebody did that I could write a thank you note for? And I was doing that for 2 reasons. First of all, I needed to get stories because, again, I have a limited view, like all of us. I have my view of what happened that Sunday. I wasn't there everywhere with all the stuff, with all the people. But the other thing I wanted to remind everyone is that you should be thanking them as well. And there's another principle here about gratitude and encouragement. And encouragement is never small when you're on the receiving end of it. And what happens is we talk ourselves out of it. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. They're not going to care about a thank you note from me. I'm telling you, when I left these organizations, people would come up to me and go, hey, you wrote me a note. And when you wrote me a note, I still have your note, but it just meant the world to me. How could you see me in all of that? And again, 3 thank you notes a day. Was I perfect at it? No. Was I good at it? Absolutely. Because I had a system, and I would look at myself in the mirror and go, did I write 3 thank you notes today? And it bothered me if I didn't. And I would, write 3 the next day. And now it doesn't have to be 3, it can be 1. But I write in the book, I won't go through the whole story, but Frank Blake, the former CEO of Home Depot, he would write 100 a week. And he says that was one of the things that turned Home Depot around when he took it over. They fired his predecessor, and he was kind of handed a mess. And when I asked him, what was the one thing you did to turn this thing around? He said, well, it was probably the handwritten thank you notes. And so I just think people, and Andy has this principle too about unexpressed gratitude communicates in gratitude. So for leaders, we're like, you know what? I'm so thankful for our team. I feel grateful. That's good. And Andy would say, no, feeling grateful is not good enough. It's good that you feel grateful, but unexpressed gratitude communicates in gratitude. You've got to say it. And in my case, I wanted to write it because and I just think I love going to the mailbox, bill, catalog, bill. Oh, there's a note from the church. Oh, wow. And they open it up. And so just that, again, the more personable, the more remarkable. And again, a question that I asked, in fact, I printed out and had everybody put on their laptop was, what did I do today to cast vision for Gwinnett Church? And the operative word there being today. And the thank you notes were a way for me to remind people of our vision and to reinforce the behavior I wanted repeated when I saw them being for the people that attended our church.
That's good. A great way to end too, I think, with so many, advisor entrepreneurs that listen to this. Like, have you express that gratitude to your team, to the people that really help you do what you do, and the expression of that is important to fix. So that's
because we can lull ourselves to sleep. I'm so grateful for our team. They probably know I'm great. It's kind of like in a marriage, my wife knows that I love her, right? I don't have to tell her, right? So that saying thank you is just so helpful. So you just got to say it. You just can't feel it. You have to say it.
That's good. Okay, you ready for just a couple quick lightning round questions? They can be short answers, whatever comes to mind. So the first one, I said as a leader, the last 2 years have been interesting, or going on 2+ years now. Is there a lesson that you learned over these past 2 years that you think you'll carry forward for the rest of your career or life?
Absolutely. It comes from John Maxwell. It came at that exchange event that you were talking about that I was at a couple of years ago. John said, I never had a clear vision. I just kept moving forward. And Cody, when I heard that, I thought, wait, I understand me, little old me, not having a clear vision, but the leadership guru didn't have a clear vision. And in these 2 years, there's been ups and downs, good days and bad days, but I've just remembered, John, keep moving forward. And sometimes I think we as leaders, we think we need to have a 5-year vision and all this kind of stuff. And all that's great if you have it. I don't have that. I have an idea. I've got a strategy. I've got some thoughts, but you know what I do? I just have to keep moving forward. So that's those 3 words, especially when I get stuck or have a bad day or a disappointment. Okay. Keep moving forward.
That's great. He said something similar vein at the event I was at that I've just repeated so often. He said, I found in life that when I start walking, God starts working. And he said, so many people sit around just trying to figure out the perfect, but I've found like you start walking, doors start opening, you start making connections, and it's very similar, and like just keep moving forward. So really like that. What is one thing, or maybe the one thing that you did that graduated you from good to great in your career?
Not thinking I was great, and thinking of myself as not a great leader, but an improving leader. I think once I start to think that I'm a great leader, I can start believing my own press. So I have to be an improving leader. How am I improving, and how did I get better today? Am I better today? And am I a better person? And am I a better person? And I'm all for being a better leader, but I think being a better person will help me be a better leader. So am I improving today?
So that's a great transition for the next question. Speaking of improvement, is there anything that you're doing to drive your own personal growth this year that you're excited about?
Yes, I am investing more this year in my emotional health than imagine last year, I launched a business in the middle of a global pandemic. So I have a great story to tell, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. So, but what I discovered, Cody, is about, millions and millions of people are doing the same right now. Everybody's kind of, the great resignation.
Yeah.
So for me, I was just, when somebody would ask me to come, will you think about coming to speak? Yes. We're like, well, Jeff, we haven't even told you the date yet. I don't care. I'm available. Right. And I found myself, near the end of the year. So I'm a University of Georgia Bulldog. We won our first national championship.
Fun year for you.
Years.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I spent most of those fall Saturdays in a hotel room because I was speaking the next day. And I called my wife. I was in somewhere in New York, and it was snowing. And I don't really do snow, being from Atlanta, in November, watching Georgia play Tennessee in a hotel room all by myself. And I said, I don't think I want to do this next year. And so really investing in, I have 3 counselors, and I actually hired a transition consultant that helped me work through any transition, there's things you're excited about, things you're grieving, all of that kind of stuff. So really investing in fact, I have a call with one of my counselors today just to make sure that I'm doing well, because I just think the more emotionally healthy I am, and I think all of us could probably use some help based on all that we've went through, right? So I think investing in my own emotional health and saying no more this year than saying yes. I think saying no for me is hard, because if I turn that spigot off, Cody, and then I turn it back on, will there come anything out of the spigot? So I think just making sure, how am I doing, and having more sustainable pace will help me this year.
That's great. What is it can't be your own book, although I highly recommend your book, but what's the one book that you've recommended most to other entrepreneurs, leaders, business owners?
It's interesting. John's revising this. It's the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Yep.
So it's coming out, a new version is coming out in the summer of 2022. And so that's just a classic leadership book. People ask me that question a lot. It kind of depends on the area that you're talking about, because
Sure.
there are all kinds of different areas of life. But I would say from a leadership standpoint, that is the classic 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
I would say a lesson. I just reread that at the beginning of this year after going to the exchange event, and it had probably been 10-ish years, maybe even longer than that, since I had read it. I feel like I read it probably when we started this company. What was interesting, and I would just repeat, if people have not read that book, they should. It hit me in so many different ways today with where I'm at as a leader versus where I was 15 years ago when I read it. That it's just one of these timeless that I think, I even wrote down, I can read this book every year and I'm going to get something great out of it, just because as you grow and mature as a leader, it's going to speak to you differently. But I forgot how good that book was, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's a great one.
It's interesting you say that, Cody, because that's one of the reasons John revised it. He was rereading it and was like, you know what? I just feel like what I've learned over these years, I can make this better. And again, that goes back to growth and getting better. He didn't read the book going, this is the greatest book I've ever read. He's like, he read the book and said, I can make this better. And so that's what he did. And again, he took a really, really good book that I just mentioned was the book I referenced, but he goes, I can make it better based on the life experience he's had in the years since it's written.
That's cool. Okay, final question. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
There's not a limit to what a person can do when he or she doesn't care who gets the credit. And we all have our ego. And another side book, probably the second book I recommend, is Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. I read that book once a year, and it's just a reminder to say, Jeff, the economy is not your enemy. The government's not your enemy. So-and-so is not your enemy. Your ego is the enemy. Don't let it get in the way. And that was my first business mentor, my first real boss, if you will, sat me down and said, Jeff, there's not a limit to what a person can do when he or she doesn't care who gets the credit. And it's going to be a test, but it's true. And I've tried to keep that at the forefront.
Well, to give great advice, to give you a little credit, I knew this would be an awesome conversation. It blew away the expectations. Maybe just as we wrap, I know you've got a company now where you're helping individuals find what they are for, which is the book that everyone needs to go pick up. But you really talk about growth strategy for life, work, improving your communication skills. Would you just maybe tell people how they can connect with you if they're interested in learning more, where they can go find more on Jeff Henderson?
Sure. It's just jeffhenderson.com. And there's a lot of free assessments that we have, one of which is called the Career Risk Calculator. There are a lot of people have asked me over the last almost 2 years now, Cody, hey, how did you make the decision to leave and all of this? And I said, well, here's kind of my strategy. Here's the assessment. And in fact, it's what my next book is called, What to Do Next. So you can see all that at jeffhenderson.com. And we help, communicators, we help leaders and help organizations. But so What to Do Next is coming out later this summer. So I'm excited about that. But there's an assessment about Career Risk Calculator, there's assessment about your voice. There are 4 voices, presenter voices, teacher, visionary, motivator, and storyteller. And you have one of those. And once you understand that, you can leverage the strength and avoid the weaknesses of that. So those kind of assessments are there, and that's all for free.
Awesome. Jeff, it has been a pleasure. Glad we finally connected. Thank you for adding so much value to the people that are going to listen to this, and just appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Cody. I appreciate it.
For everyone who listens, if you did enjoy this episode with Jeff, do me a favor and just go share it with someone else. I think our world needs great leaders now more than ever before, and we want to help this message spread far and wide. So, Jeff, appreciate the time, buddy.
Absolutely, Cody. Keep up the great work.